What's up, everybody? You're tuned in to the Founder Hour podcast. I'm your co-host, Pat, and today's guest on the show is Jon Stein. Jon is the founder and chairman of Betterment, the largest independent online financial advisor in the United States with over $22 billion of assets under management. Founded in 2008 during the global financial crisis, Betterment is one of the pioneers in the robo-advisory industry, using computer algorithms to generate personalized advice and manage investment portfolios. We spoke with Jon about his upbringing and what he was interested in as a kid, his passion for writing and why he loves it so much, deciding to forgo a medical career after college and working on Wall Street, how the idea for Betterment came about, why he decided to step down as CEO in late 2020, and what he's up to now. We also settle a highly debated issue and a question we were dying to ask Jon. Is it finance or finance? Tune in to find out. Here we go.
I'll start by saying I grew up in Dallas, Texas, and nobody really guesses that because I guess I don't have a Texas accent anymore. My Dallas friends say I have a New York accent or something, whatever that is. And
I definitely don't hear a Dallas accent at all.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I grew up there. I lived 18 years in Dallas. My parents are still there. They're both they were city planners when I was growing up, and I didn't have a lot of exposure to finance or anything like that. It was kind of a foreign thing to me. It's something people did maybe in New York City or San Francisco, but not in Texas, and had really no knowledge of it. I went to St. Mark's, which is a great high school in Dallas, and I edited the paper there, the Remarker, and got really into journalism. And when I applied to college, I thought I was going to be a journalist. That was my college essays were about that. And I was just talking about this yesterday because I got a call from a reporter at the Remarker, a senior there, who was doing a story on GameStop and trading, and said, "We want to talk to Jon Stein, see what he has to say about this." And said, "I don't know if you really want to talk to me. I don't have a lot of great things to say about it." He's like, "Oh no," and he asked me, "How does it feel to have to be interviewed by somebody on the Remarker since you edited the paper so many years ago?" And I said, "It feels great. This is exactly." Never imagined I'd be so lucky. So it's fun to keep in touch.
Did you sort of just fall into that when you were like in high school, or did like growing up as a younger kid, maybe prior to high school, you had this like, I don't know, characteristic about you that you figured, I might be a good journalist or something?
I was drawn to it. I was a writer. I was like in my eighth grade, I won school's like writing award, right, for English class, and so I thought, well, maybe I'll try writing. And I wrote, and when I got to college, I started working on the Harvard Crimson, and I got a column. It was called Bus Stop. I also love traveling, but this was about just like taking the bus to different cities, to different like towns around Boston, and just like checking out what was going on there and writing about it. And like I went to the airport and I talked to the baggage handlers and just like here, like what's going on, and I didn't like the writing. Like I just got sick of it pretty quickly, and I realized what I had loved about the paper wasn't the writing, but it was like building the team, kind of like bringing some friends together. One person to be the news editor, one person to send out the papers and put the stamps on them. Like just all the different jobs that had to be done.
Right.
Like kind of organizing that was fun for me. And it was one of the early clues that I had that maybe someday I'd want to start a company. Although I didn't really know what that would entail, it was intriguing to me.
Jon, as a kid, a lot of kids are into sports and other, outdoor activities. And I know you weren't that kid. I remember listening to a couple of interviews of yours, and you talk about how you used to just be up in the, look up in the sky looking for planes to fly by. What were you interested in though as a kid?
One of my favorite things growing up was Scouts. I was a Boy Scout. I was an Eagle Scout, and I just fell into a great troop. There was a great troop at my elementary school, which meant that like a lot of my friends were also in it, and we met regularly. It was fun. It was like at my school, so it was easy. But then once a month or so, we'd go on a camp out. And in Texas, like, people, there's no mountains. There's not really, there's a couple rivers, but they're far from Dallas. But like people had like, you know, a plot of land where they grew some grass and maybe had a couple of cows, like in a pasture somewhere, like a couple hours outside of the city. And we'd go out there and like set up tents and, jump off, build piles of hay bales and jump off them and have campfires and see rattlesnakes and try and catch them. And it was just like a lot of fun. I really loved that. And I got into hiking and I got into like just being a scout leader. And that was another thing that sort of made me think like, oh, like I like organizing, like, like these like hikes and stuff. And I got my dad into hiking over time. Like he started joining us on some stuff and he still does it. He's like he organizes like big campouts of and they like it's like adult groups through what's it called? Forget, but they go out to like New Mexico and Colorado all the time and do big hikes.
And John, I know like being an Eagle Scout is probably what the highest ranking in the Boy Scouts. It's no small feat. What do you think at that age as a young kid? What made you so good at being a leader? Right? What were you like in your leadership abilities? And it's weird to maybe ask somebody who's a young kid those questions, but looking back, what would you say were the qualities that you recognized and were aware of that made you the way that you were?
I'd never have really seen myself as a leader, or certainly didn't at that time. I think I was quiet as a kid and kind of reserved and like you said, not great at sports. Like I didn't feel like I was like super outgoing or a leader. I did. I think I loved those activities because I could just kind of join, and there was sort of like a natural path to organizing things, and people, I guess, were drawn to me. I guess I listened well. I guess I was inclusive, right? Like I tended to try to help people get along, and I like to kind of just like see things work well, and I wanted everyone to be happy, right? I wanted people to kind of like and enjoy the journey. Let's have fun with this. Like we're here together, and I think people are kind of drawn to that. I had an example in my mind too from my grandparents, and that my mom's side of the family who had run a family furniture business in upstate New York, a furniture manufacturing business, and I saw the community that they built. We'd go up there every Christmas and sometimes in the summer too, to like far upstate New York where they lived and ran this furniture factory in a tiny town that at the time was the oldest family-owned furniture manufacturing company in America. And they've since shut down, unfortunately, but they they showed me how to like the way they lived was like they took care of like this town. They had a lot of friends in the community. They were always giving back to that community, kind of like making the most of it, and the community rewarded them by working hard and making great furniture. And it was you know they both passed a few years ago. Eventually, that factory shut down, and it's but it was certainly in my mind that like as a style of community building and that as a facet of leadership.
Did that also play a role in your sort of, I guess, desire to perhaps be an entrepreneur and start your own business because you saw what was sort of possible if you did?
For sure, it did, and I don't think I appreciated that until I was there. But like I guess maybe the thing that's on my mind is what a privilege to get to see that, like how lucky I was to get to grow up with that as an influence. And, you know, um, in my family, and an example and something I could aspire to. And for sure, it gave me some confidence along the way that, well, hey, they did it, so maybe I can too. And I feel really lucky to have had that example and that confidence.
Yeah. And were there any people around that you can think of that you sort of perhaps looked up to when you were a kid, or maybe they were like a mentor to you that sort of helped you navigate those early years? Perhaps it was through high school or college, and just kind of, were someone that you can talk to and they would give you advice, or what was it? Was most of it just kind of you having to figure it out for yourself?
So many people all along the way, and from my parents and other family members to the scout leaders and um, to the school, to the teachers that I had. I mean, St. Mark's was really influential on me. I think it was more so than college. Really, I had such great mentors. I had a English and history teacher, there, who taught me 3 different years, and he was just incredible. My journalism teacher, Mia Squilla, she was amazing. My One of my math teachers, Miss Sutcliffe, and one of my physics teachers, Mr. Bauer, just like all amazing people who saw enough in me that they kind of gave me some individual attention and pushed me along the way. And I think back to my fifth grade teacher, Bill Klug, who passed away a couple years ago, who was the one who told my parents to put me in private school, because he said, John is he's doing fine. He gets everything here, but he's not going to really challenge himself. You have to sort of challenge him. You've got to put him in a different environment if you want it. And that sort of made all the difference, right? So great. I mean, without that, I probably wouldn't be talking to y'all today. But there's just so many of those things along the way, right, that I'm grateful for.
John, what did your parents do, and were you at all? I know a lot of kids, look up to their parents, and some of them even end up in the same professions as they do. Right? They're like, "Oh, we're going to take over the family business," or if my dad's a lawyer, I'm going to become a lawyer too, or if my mom's a banker, I want to become a banker too. Right? They see success around them, or they see other people enjoying what they do, and they want to mimic that. Right? Kids, that's what they do. Was that the case for you?
I was fascinated by what my parents did. They were city planners, and so there were always lots of maps around, and visions for how we might redevelop downtown Dallas or this neighborhood or the arts district. And a lot of those things have come to pass, by the way. A lot of the things that they were, a lot of big projects that they had. I mean, they helped to reshape the city. Now, they were planners; they weren't like the real estate developers, so they didn't get rich doing it. It wasn't a very
Right.
lucrative thing. They worked for the city, right? And ultimately, my dad became a consultant in later years and started working for the developers. Still not as lucrative as being the developer. And my mom became a real estate lawyer. So she went back to school when I was in middle school and high school and got her law degree. But um, real estate was always interesting to me, but I didn't see it from, say, the investing standpoint. I saw it from the planning standpoint, and that I didn't see a career in it. I did when I was in college. I worked on maps. I was the map editor for the Let's Go travel guide. But I was kind of combining a little bit of my love for travel and writing with this other thing. It felt like a good thing to try. I'm glad I didn't go into that as a career.
I read that you mentioned, wanting to sort of be a journalist, I guess, going into college, but I read that you majored in economics and were also pre-med. Is that right?
Yeah, I took a lot of psych classes, and I did a post-bac pre-med year after I graduated. I really thought I was going to be a doctor after all this time, after majoring in economics. I saw most of my classmates graduating and going, senior year, they were all doing these recruiting interviews, going to investment banks or investment firms or trying to work at hedge funds. And I just said, why? What do you want to do there? And they're I see now what I didn't appreciate as much then, that it's a very good stepping stone. You get some a network and some skills. You can go on and do other things, but it just felt to me kind of not like very thoughtful, like just going to help rich people make more money. A big part of me is this like happiness, and like human happiness is, I think, like one of the highest goods, right? Like increasing total human happiness just feels like obviously a thing that we should do if we can, like it just feels like the right, like morally like right. But you can't just make people happy, right? You can't like I can tell you a joke and you'll laugh or whatever, like, but I'm not a comedian, but like you can't just make people happy, but you can maybe create the right conditions and the right environment. Like governments can do that, and corporations can do that, and communities can do that. Just almost like you create the right soil conditions for a plant to grow. You can the right sunlight and all these things. And what I think helps people be happy, and I studied this as in my psych classes and in my own reading and such, was one of the big drivers of happiness is equality, right? And when we see inequality and we see people who have so much more than us and it feels unattainable at so much more, people get kind of hopeless. It's sort of like, but like, if we're kind of like keeping up with the neighbors, like, we're in a place where we feel like, like we have an equal shot, equality of opportunity exists, then we're generally happier. And so I am very frustrated by the growing inequality in American society. I'm comforted by the increasing equality in global society, right? Like the rise of India and China and Africa have like made the world a less unequal place. But in this country, we're kind of going in the wrong direction. And I think people who help rich people get richer are making that worse. And I have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder about that, right? Like, I don't think they're like bad people. I don't think like people who work at hedge funds are like knowingly, it's not like they're like, I like people who work at oil companies. Like, I don't think they're bad people. They're like doing a job that has like a, a necessary thing. Some would say, oh, well, they're contributing to global warming. It's like terrible. I'm like, yes, but like, there's a system here. It's like more complicated than that. Like, so I don't think it's not for me, like I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try and work against it. I'm going to try and like push the other way toward more equality. And for me, like, it was hard to know how to do that. It's still hard to know how to do it. I'm like, like Betterment is doing in one facet, and, now I'm thinking about other ways I can kind of further that agenda.
And these were things that you were thinking about in college when you were thinking about what career path to take. Like, this was what was going through your mind?
Yes, is exactly what I was thinking about, is how do I help make people happier? How do I help make the world, a more equal, better place for people to live, like a better place for my kids, but not just for my kids, for everybody's kids. Cause like, I believe in this idea that like, I've been very lucky, but what if I hadn't been born, as I was, like a white male in North America in a time when, like that was an incredibly privileged thing to be, in the most like privileged, like era of, of all of human history, and like the best country. It's just like most people don't get that. And so how do like, and I kind of just like, I like the idea of like, if I were born as a random other person in the world, I would want, like, how do I kind of make it better for that random other person, right? Because that could be me, right? And that person has every much right to happiness as I do. And so how do we sort of like give everyone a fair shot, equality of opportunity? It's a big thing for me. And I just, like the medical thing, to get back to that question, like I was like, this is a great way to feel really good about like my everyday. I'm going to be making people healthier, and it's a fine standard of living. Like doctors do well. Like my own happy will, my own family will be like fine. But I started going down that path, and I didn't like blood. I was volunteering in the hospitals, and I felt like frustrated by like the disorganization, and I was like, it was almost like the journalism thing. Like, I didn't want to do the writing. I didn't want to do the medicine. I wanted to be running the hospital. I wanted to be running the paper. Right. And when I was working in the labs, I felt the same thing. Like, just pipetting stuff and doing research, like I can't be bothered. I want to like set the research agenda. I want to like, and I realized through those even like those medical, I love the science, but through the experiences of volunteering and stuff, I realized I wanted to be in business. I wanted to be like running the thing, and I didn't know what that meant, but it felt like, a magnet for me.
It's interesting because it's funny because like if we were to like survey pretty much anyone who's sort of in a college setting and perhaps has taken on student debt or is just like ambitious to get a degree in whatever they're getting in and go off and do great things in their career, I it's like if we were to survey them, I have a feeling most people would say I want to make like an impact on the world and change people's lives and all that stuff. But the difference is I think that you have to put yourself in a position to be able to do that. Now, yet you could perhaps go down a very long career path and make a bunch of money being a lawyer or doctor or something, and then eventually with that money and having the means, you can perhaps make a difference. Or you can take massive risks earlier on in your career to be in a position where perhaps you have equity in a company that you started or co-founded or something. So and then that is kind of your path to getting the means to be able to make a difference. And whether it's through the money that you have or the power or influence that you have in your community or whatnot. And so there's so many different ways of going about it, but I think you have to really be mindful at how you're structuring your career and career path. And it's not very clear at that moment, but there are things that you can do that could get you on that trajectory, right? And so for you specifically, I don't know if you ended up pursuing the medical field or going into that field after college, but what did you end up doing immediately after graduating?
I think you're exactly right. I think most people want to have an impact. They want to make their world a better place. They want to make their community better off. And I'm an optimist. I like to say I prepare for the worst, but I hope for the best. I think humans are capable of amazing things, and most of us like really want to do. So I'm completely agree with you, but it's hard. Like the if it were easy, we'd be doing that thing. Like
Right. Exactly.
everyone would do it if it were obvious. Like how and a lot of the ways that we make the world a better place, people are doing. I mean, like the simple things like just being great at your job as a teller at the bank or the checkout person at at the convenience store or the server at the restaurant or the whatever it is, like being amazing at that and making people happy every day is like, gosh, that's it, that's making a huge impact. But but like you said, like some people try to get there through, maybe I'll do this thing that's like not that immediate like gratification for others around me, but I'll have some money and I'll sort of like give it to good causes, or I'll get a platform. It's hard. I feel like, again, lucky that in Betterment I was able to find an idea to start a company that would not only grow and be a good financial return for me and others who work there, but more importantly, or equally importantly maybe, would also just be providing a service that's like making all of our customers better off, right? Like most, like those opportunities feel hard to come by, but it was important to me, right? Like I was like, I'm not gonna like start a company that's on the wrong side of things. But
John, one thing I wanted
hard.
to ask was, I remember seeing that while you were at Harvard, you had a company in your dorm room that you started. What was that all about, and where did that idea even come from?
When I was an undergrad, you might be thinking of the House Grill. I ran like
Yeah.
the student restaurant there. Again, like sort of like right place, right time, but I guess I was drawn to it, right? Like there was like a late night, hamburger and wraps kind of a thing. We were open from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Every night, and it just it felt fun to me. Like I was drawn to it as a customer. I guess I'm a little bit of a night owl, and like it was fun, and I immediately like kind of fell into it, and I was like, yeah, I want to work here, and so I did. And then after working there for a year, they asked me to run it, and I was like happy to do that. It was so I was making trips to Star Market and BJ's and picking up supplies every week, and like I managed it, so like I got to figure out what would go on the menu, and like the whole thing, like it was my little business, and I got to hire the people, and it was just fun. And uh but again, like what a lucky thing, like they gave me like an again, even at that time, I wasn't like, oh, like I'm going to be in business, this is a great experience to
Right.
like set me down this path, like not at all. Like I didn't
Right.
even like I didn't
Yeah.
even see it like that. It was just like a fun thing to do.
Right.
And so, but a good experience.
So you graduate Harvard undergrad, you do this year of like pre-med, you decide this isn't necessarily the path I want to go down. You know, if I'm not mistaken, you ended up working at Harvard for a couple of years, right?
I stayed at Harvard. You're well researched, but I stayed there to do the post bac pre med year, and then in 2003, I graduated 2001. So like early 2003, I moved to New York City. I actually did a road trip first because I was lost. I was like sort of like I don't know what I'm gonna do. And I rarely tell this part of my story, but I took 4 months and I bought an old Cadillac Biarritz convertible, 1980 84 car. Bought it for like $6,000 and fixed it up. It didn't need a lot, fortunately. It was in great condition. Bought it in Florida from a collector or something, and then drove it to every state, every one of the 48 continental states with one of my college friends. And we stayed with friends, like we camped out, like in national parks and stuff. Like it was cheap. We'd like go to the national park like after 5 p.m. when we wouldn't have to pay the park fee, and like leave before 7 a.m. or whatever you know so but we got to see a lot of the country. And then we ended up in New York. I ended up selling the car for exactly what I paid for it. And then a lot of my friends had moved to New York, and one of my happiest friends was working at this firm, First Manhattan Consulting Group, and they were consulting to banks. And I was like, oh, financial services, But I guess he's happy, so I guess I'll try it. He'd been doing it for a couple of years and had seen success, and interviewed. I totally bombed the interview. I think I think that like I remember the partner who talked to me saying like, well, I'm not compelled, that's interesting, but I'm not compelled.
Yeah.
Like, 'cause you hear me, who I am. Like, I'm not like, I wasn't like selling myself. I wasn't like
Right.
nailing the case or anything. Like, I'm just like, yeah, like maybe I'll do this, and they're like,
Well,
okay.
moral of the story: if you're in college and most of your friends are going into financial services or in the finance world, and you're not sure of it, just drop everything, go travel the whole country, and see everything you can see, and come back. And if you still end up in finance, you're probably meant to be there.
Right. That's right.
I mean, like in your case, like what were you doing like in those four years at the consulting company? Like what are your biggest takeaways from that job?
It was incredible. I mean, I sort of, sometimes I make fun of it, or I say, we were just helping the banks make more money, but I met amazing people. I worked for some incredible partners. I feel really lucky to have had that experience. Like they're all great. And they mentored me a lot and like helped me develop. I remember being like so frustrated, when they'd be like, that's the way you're saying this, like, this is too strong. I'd be like, no, it's just right. Like, this is what it is. And I was like so mad. Like that feedback, like too strong, but like, it was great feedback, like now that I reflect on it, like, I think like I learned a ton from that job. And like projects were like retail. So meaning where should you put your branches? And we had this whole model that I operated for a while it took, I mean, all this stuff kind of sounds like ancient, but at the time it was cutting edge, where we had this database of every bank branch in the country, and we could like geolocate them. and figure out like how much. We also knew how many assets they had, and so we could help a bank know like where else to open their branches that were like profitable locations for their competitors, and that kind of modeling stuff. We do risk management. We do investment portfolio policy for like the big net, like the top 50 national banks, and even international. I had clients in Australia. I got to go live in Melbourne, Australia for 6 months, and I had a client in Puerto Rico, and I got to go live in San Juan for some time, and like it was super fun and like really interesting projects. And I learned a lot about banking and financial services, and I was like, well, I don't know if I want to start a bank, but I bet I have more credibility to start something in this field than the other 50 things that like I was interested in all the things I am now, which is like back then I was like, why aren't we voting online? Why can't everyone vote like online? Like this is stupid. Like it's still stupid. It's still stupid that we don't have online voting for it, like make it more accessible. Like, but not obvious to me like exactly how you go about making that happen as a non-elected official. And or even as one, right? It's a hard problem. But like I was like, but I bet I could start a business, and like that would be fun, and I could start a business that would help a lot of people, because I had friends coming to me and saying, what should I do with my money? I don't know. Like you know something about investing, right? Like what are you doing? And I answered that question enough times, and I realized that like even once I answered it, people weren't necessarily doing it, not because they didn't like think it was right, but it was just like it's hard, like what's tax optimization, like what, like or how do I know if I'm actually properly diversified, and when do I change? Remember, like this was a time, like again, it sounds like ancient, but there was nowhere you could go that would like build a portfolio for you and rebalance it and tax optimize it for you. Betterment invented that, right? Like, I mean, granted, we were standing on the shoulders of giants. Like we had ETFs, that were available to us. We had, web technologies that like, we didn't invent, but like just kind of putting all the things together so that anyone could have a really smart, broadly diversified investment account that made them extra money, but through like tax optimization, and helped them do the right thing through like smart planning and advice and stuff like this. Like we pioneered that. We Betterment continues to pioneer in that space. There's a lot more work to do around advice and helping people make the most of their money.
So, John, when you're at this, consulting firm for about 4 years, you're obviously learning a lot of stuff, and not only are you gaining, these hard skills about finance and investing in other companies and how they operate, but I assume you were also meeting such great people and coming up with a bunch of different ideas. When did you decide that it was time to settle on, or I guess settle is the wrong word, but time to, move forward with Betterment and quit your job entirely and say, you know what, I'm all in on this thing. Let's go figure out how we're going to do it.
You guys asked such great questions, and I remember I was at there was like an alumni event for like St. Mark's alumni, and I talked to this guy. I think I don't even remember his name, right? But like I think he worked at like a hedge fund out like in Connecticut or something, and I was just talking to like a bunch of people at the thing to see what they're up to, and I was telling him, yeah, I've been working as like a consultant for a few years, and I just like, but I kind of want to start this company, and I'm just like, I'm not sure. It's a big risk, and I'd been modeling it out. Like, I was sure I would make more money by staying at the consulting firm, and I was just like, but like, I kind of want it. Like, I think it's time. And I remember him just saying like, pull the ripcord, man, like do it. And like, that just stuck in my head of like, oh yeah, I guess like, like I'm not getting any younger. Like, I think it's time. I think like the next week I went and I talked to my managers at First Manhattan. And I said, I want to start this business. Can I work part-time? And fortunately they said okay, and I was so surprised that they said okay. They let me. I basically, I feel like so brash like in saying this now, like the way that I did it, but I was just like, well, here's how much like you're paying me for like a week, so I want you to, this will be my daily rate, and I'll work like 2 days a week or more, like it'll be flexible, and you'll pay me as like an hourly, and the rest of the time I'll get to go work on my business. And I want to keep my office here, right? And like, and I'll get to like work, And they were like, okay. I was like, what? Oh, yeah, great. So I did that, and I did that for maybe 6 months or 9 months. I don't remember exactly. And I was doing a bunch of research. Again, I'm grateful to the folks at First Manhattan. I needed to learn a lot, right? So I did a bunch of like learning and researching, and then I went to business school, and I almost didn't. I thought I might just like leave and start a business, but I didn't have like the idea wasn't fully baked. It was like I knew I'd have to actually like leave First Manhattan to actually spend the time and actually like put things together, like working part-time. As much as it sort of like moved me in that direction and got me more excited about doing something, like I kept getting drawn back in, and I ended up working like 4 days that week, or 5, just wasn't working the weekends. But
Right.
I wasn't quite there. I talked to my parents, and I talked to talked to my uncle. I talked to where I'm staying now. I talked to a lot of folks, and some advised me to just start and do it. I remember my uncle said that, and some advised me to go to business school. You're not going to regret that. I remember my parents saying that, and I chose that because I thought I'll work on it, and I'll work on it while I'm there. And I did. I went to Columbia. I worked a lot on the business while I was at Columbia. It was great. Again, it's hard to look back and have any regrets when
Right.
things have worked out well. Could I have gotten a little faster start without Columbia? Maybe, but I also learned a lot there. I met a lot of people who are like dear to me now. So I really, really treasure that time. And I learned about. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So one question we get asked a lot, and I think is a pretty interesting topic, is, for folks that have an idea, right, like yourself, but are working somewhere, they're making good money. I assume you were making pretty good money living in New York. You can't just make like $60,000 and get by. So it's a hard. I mean,
you
can, but
make 60,000 and get by. I did it. So
okay. Well, I guess I got your salary right. But let's assume you're making a little less than that, or even a little more. Doesn't matter. But you're making money, right? And it's a tough feeling to go from even $40,000 a year to zero overnight when you're building your own business. But for the people out there that are listening to this podcast right now, that have an idea, that have a job, but really want to leave that job and go and pursue this idea, what's your recommendation to them? Is it stick it out at at your company as long as possible, get paid, work on your idea as much as possible, or go 100%, 1,000% in on whatever your idea is and pursue it just completely?
Boy, it's so hard and individual. There's no one right answer, right? And what works for one person doesn't work for others. I lived incredibly cheaply, and a lot of people I respect do that at like at least for a time. I mean, I ate dumplings, which were $1, at the dumpling shop. I lived in Chinatown. I lived very cheaply. And I would eat those dumplings that were $1 because I knew I was saving money. Like every time like they were good too, but like, the Chinese, the noodle and chicken shop, chicken broccoli was $3.50. I ate that, 3 nights a week. I just like, I lived very cheaply. And I like we used to buy the beers that were warm at the bodega because they were like, it was like $3 for like a 6-pack that was warm and $3.50 for the one in the freezer. So like I saved, and that gave me enough over time that I could like work for like a year on my idea without being funded, and still live fine. I hope I always do that. I hope I don't ever lose that.
Hopefully you're eating better than $1 dumplings now.
Yeah, they were good. They were good dumplings. But yeah, like as things change, like I want to. I think happiness is not like like this, like everyone knows this, right? But like it's so easy to forget like the obvious thing that like happiness has nothing to do with like how much you're spending, right? Like it doesn't make you any like, of course it's nice to go out to a good dinner, of course it's it's fun to travel, like, and like like these are important things, but you can do that very cheaply, right? You can see those kinds of contrasts cheaply.
John, I'm kind of picking not off that question, but like a little bit different. But people have ideas all the time, right? Especially, just kind of. I mean, they're like a dime a dozen. I mean, like they're just everywhere, right? And actually getting started is the tough part, right? Getting, or figuring out, all right, like what's the next step of, oh, I'm not a technical person and I have to create an app, or I have to create a program, or I don't, I have to go find a co-founder now, and I have to go raise money and I don't have the money to start this, and all these things come up, which kind of deters people from perhaps taking that next step. And so they're sort of always just kind of stuck with the idea and they don't really do anything about it. In your case, you had this idea, you saw something that you wanted to pursue. What was the immediate next step? Like, how did you get the ball rolling? Did you already met co-founders and that you had a team put together pretty much right from the get-go, or did you have to go out and search for that? Like, what was your process like?
Here's another great question, and it reminds me of your last, which is like, what do you do? Like, do you just go for it? Do you like stay at your job? I'll tell you, like, for me, it's just kind of like taking advantage of every opportunity and like taking things as signs. Like, I don't happen to be like a person of faith. Like my family like are, right. Like, I grew up going to church. I am not a person of like of faith, but I do like to just sort of like take things as signs, meaning like if I have a strong feeling about something or something just sort of seems to fall into place, like just go for it. Because sometimes just making a decision and like moving is better than like sitting and like waiting for like the optimal thing. And so like I in the case of like how did I just like get going, or what did I do first? I had a bunch of ideas, but um, I talked to a couple of folks who were like, "Oh, I would use that product," and I was like, "All right, I think this is a thing. I'm gonna start like developing it." And another lucky thing is my roommate at the time was a software engineer at Google. His name is Sean Owen, and he had some like coding books, and he's like, well, if you want to like build a thing, like start with these. And it was like ActionScript for Dummies, and ActionScript was Flex. I built like the first version of Betterment in Flex. I just started building it. I was just like, I'm going to do this, and I really thought I was just going to do it on myself. I ran into some trouble. I needed Sean's help. Like, fortunately, he was there. He could sort of like, guide me. And he set up like the server and like the stuff I would need to, for my front end to communicate to. And eventually, like, he joined as like a co-founder, right? He was like, yeah, this, you're doing this thing. Couldn't have done it without him. And then I was talking to friends. One of my friends that like organized a poker game that I went to a couple of times, and I was terrible at poker. Like, I just went for like, to sit around and drink some beers and hang out. But like this guy was like good at it, and like was like an organizer of the game. He was over, and I was telling him about this thing I was working on. He's like, "That's really cool. Like, I think I would like to help you with that. Is there anything I can do?" And I was like, "Well, you're a securities lawyer. Maybe like take these books that I've been reading and like figure out like the regulatory stuff that I'm kind of can't do as well as all the coding and all of this kind of stuff." And that was Eli Braverman, and just continuing to involve people in the story and in the journey, and like kind of like bringing them in. I met one of my former colleagues from FMCG, Anthony, at like a Christmas party that one of our mutual friends threw, and I told him about the thing, and he's like, oh, "That's pretty cool." And I was like, "Yeah, and you've like built like online banks for people before, right? Like, do you want to come and like run product for us?" And he's like, "I mean, I'll think about it, and he did. And like, he ended up being our first employee and joined us. Gosh, we got lucky and just kind of kept like bringing people in, like, as anyone who would like listen and get interested. I hired a lot of my friends in those early days. It was all about like friends and family. High school friends worked with me, college friends worked with me. It was 2009 and 10. It was like after like sort of a bumpy period in the US economy. And so like a lot of people were not fully engaged or employed. And so, and that was lucky too, like people were like available. And so that's it.
So, John, for those that don't know, what Betterment is by now, because we would have already said it in the introduction, but for the most part, it's a robo-advisor and cash and wealth management and savings and investment company. It's kind of like, I call it a better savings account for myself, because if I put it in my bank account, I'm going to spend it on something, right? So it's not only it's actually getting me higher interest rates, but I'm actually not spending it because I don't touch that money. Nowadays, a lot of people are familiar with the concept of robo-advising and, wealth management, especially, when you're in your, hopefully you know this by now, mid-20s, 30s, 40s. But, when you guys first started off in 2008, 2009, it wasn't a necessarily well-known concept, right? Folks that had money were going to wealth managers and, they were investing their money in different index funds and stocks, et cetera, and they were investing in companies and whatever the case may be, right? Then comes Betterment, right? In 2008, 2009. Are people thinking, what the fuck is John doing?
Mm-hmm.
Or are they like, this is actually a pretty good idea, right? What was the reaction in the first, few years that you guys got?
A lot of the reaction was, yeah, what are you doing? I remember that was like Chris Sacca's reaction at TechCrunch when we launched. He's like, this is way too simple. Chris Sacca is like a notable angel investor and Shark Tank contributor, right? He was like on the panel judging us on the day that we launched at TechCrunch. And we said, yeah, but simple is good. Simple like makes it accessible. And he said, no, like people expect finance to be complicated. They expect it to be hard, and they won't trust it if it seems too simple. It'll seem like a game. I disagree with that, and he now also I think would disagree with his former self, right? Like I've seen him since, and he said, yeah, like I've made a lot of mistakes. That was one of them, So, but I don't think he was alone in thinking that finance, has always been complicated, and like that's part of the sizzle or something. I think, look, you asked about trading and whatnot, and we're sort of seeing another like bubble in kind of like the popularization of trading right now. I saw the same thing in 99, 2000, which was like, right. Remember, I graduated college in 2001 into this sort of like crash, but I was like at that time investing some of my own money and like buying stocks, and like I was into it, right? I was like reading Investors Business Daily, which is like, maybe it's still a thing. It's less of a thing than it was, but it was kind of like the Reddit forums of its day, right?
Right.
It was and subscribing to like news feeds and stuff like that, like to sort of like educate myself about buying stocks. A little bit, I think I believe now, looking back, that people just kind of maybe have to go through that. Like I did. I sort of had to go through that experience of trying it, even though I knew that most people don't beat the market. Like it's always like, yeah, but like, what if I hit it? What if I like get like that one stock that like does so well? And I did okay. I bought a bunch of airline stocks when they were really cheap, which is kind of like, in recent times, like people could have bought the same thing, right? And sort of like ridden a rebound. I did that at that time. I also bought Enron on the way down, sort of thinking, oh, well, this will turn around and rebound. And that was kind of like buying GameStop on the way down. It was just like, so I made some good decisions and some stupid decisions. And over time, I realized I'm spending a ton of time on this. And if unless I'm actually going to make a career out of day trading, which I didn't
Right.
want to do. I'm never going to be, better than like the hedge funds and the banks that are like making a career out of this and like focusing only on 10 stocks all the time. I don't have the capacity or the tools or the capital to do that. And so I should just index it and find my fortune through my career, right? Or elsewhere. It's not going to be through this. But I had to go through that journey. I had to go on that journey and learn it, kind of the hard way, right? It wasn't so damaging, but it was kind of dumb. And I think a lot of people are in the early stages of that journey now, right? I don't think like there's some fundamental shift happening where all of a sudden like day trading is going to be like the way everyone invests. It's just, that's just stupid. No one zero people like want to live in that world. It's sort of like if you told me that actually everyone's going to be like their own dentist from now on, like I would think that's like equally likely. Like no, like you go to experts for things,
Yeah.
you should. And it's going to be the same with investing over time.
You mentioned, I think you said you launched at TechCrunch. Was it like TechCrunch Disrupt or I don't know if it was one of those things, but or prior to that or right after that, I mean, in those early days, did you have to go out and raise the capital to be able to even build this thing and subsidize the customer acquisition costs and all these things from the get-go? And also, starting a fintech company at the time, I'm assuming it's not as much now, but was there a lot of red tape that you had to go through, regulatory stuff in the beginning that made it difficult, or were you able to launch it pretty quickly as soon as you had it built, at least like the MVP of it?
We pulled some capital together. So I invested some capital. Sean and Eli invested some capital. Ryan O'Sullivan, who was another partner that we met, who had a trading firm, invested some capital, and like together we had a pool where we could start to pay some employees. Like it was an angel round basically, whereas it was like a pre-seed, I guess would be the term for it today, although that didn't exist back then. We we had enough to get going, and then we almost ran out of money, right? Like we were like, I remember a lot of conversations about we launched at TechCrunch. There was like this like boom of excitement. We got like 1,000 customers on the platform after the first few days, and I was just like so excited. We were managing maybe like $1 million. It was nothing. I mean, it felt like a lot, but like when I look at today, an average-ish day for Betterment is like 20 million in net deposits, and back then it was like 10 million in the first year. So we get more in an afternoon now than we brought in that whole first year. But like we after the summer after we launched, we were growing, and then it was like those people who heard about us TechCrunch, like they were on, but we didn't have any money to market. We weren't doing a lot to like continue to grow the customer base, and we were like, whoa, what do we do? We're gonna have to raise some money. We got to raise some money to like kind of make this thing go. And I wasn't sure how to go about it. And I was lucky to connect with an attorney in New York, Ed Zimmerman at Lowenstein Sandler, who was like, I can connect you to a few, like I know a few like VC shops, and he put us in touch. One of the first ones he put us in touch with, I think the first one was Bessemer, and we talked to Rob Stavis over at Bessemer, and he was like, ooh, I like this. I like this is an idea that like we've been looking for. We've been looking for a smart answer to the question of like, what should I do with my money? And we've been looking at it for 2 years, and I think this is the best answer I've seen. And I was like, great, like we want to raise $1 million. And he said, how about 3 million? And I said, awesome, like that sounds amazing. Let's go. And it wasn't quite that easy. Like of course there's diligence and like negotiations and all this kind of stuff. But it was it happened, and I was thrilled. I mean, God, what a feeling, to like raise a first round, and to do it in New York at a time when there just weren't a lot of startups in New York. Remember too, like this is again, I sound like a grandpa, but all the action was like in San Francisco, and I had no track record. It was just a wild, fun thing to like we were on this adventure. At the time, we were in Union Square in a tiny little office, very cheap, of course. Like you know me, and I remember meeting with the guys from Simple Bank. Have you ever heard of Simple Bank? Like, I think they
No.
actually just recently like shut it down, but it was part of BBVA for a while. They were acquired by BBVA after a few years. It was like those guys were like the only other fintech in the world, as far as I knew. Like there was like nobody else, and like we had lunch at like Union Square Cafe, and it was like, we're doing this thing, like you guys are doing banking, I'm doing investing, like that's it. So it was a fun time. We were kind of lonely back then, and now it feels like such a crowded space. There's so many.
Yeah, I
So many
was about to
people.
say that, like, and since then, the fintech space has just grown so much astronomically, and there's so many new companies that have come into the space, and now it's just kind of been like a land grab in a way of like, how do we get, like, in terms of the consumer, it's like, where do I put my money? Like, there's so many options now where, like, if I have some money to invest or I want to, put into some sort of account to, grow over time, like, do I use this app? Do I use that one? Do I use this company? Like, and so for you guys, like, why do you think Betterment has been able to cut through the noise and maintain such like a large status in the fintech space and kind of be a leader in its growth, as opposed to sort of just falling by the wayside like we've seen so many different companies happen to?
Well, Betterment has some advantages. I mean, one, we're established. We have a known brand. We have an amazing team. We have some just like incumbency advantages at this point. We have some scale, and that helps. We have great backers and capital and all of those kinds of things. We also have like a genuineness, and nobody's going to come on your show and be like, well, we're kind of full of it, like we just, um, like we're just kind of marketing shills, but I really think, I believe nobody like actually does more for their customers to help make the most of their money than Betterment, right? Like, I think there's other people who are better at marketing than we are, and there's people who are better at like a certain gimmick, like, and some of those gimmicks are effective, maybe rounding up your money, sort of helps you, like, like get into a habit of saving, and maybe that's a really good thing. Maybe getting paid 2 days early means a lot to you, like, and like I can see that, like, bridging a gap, or you could just save 2 days worth of your paycheck, like I just,
Right.
like, I think a lot of those things are they tap into like behavioral things that that are smart, I'm not trying to like lessen, I give credit to people for like discovering those things, because like as a behavioral economist, like I remember studying a lot of those things, like they're really smart, and we've done some of them too. I mean, auto deposit for Betterment was huge. I mean, it's a no-brainer, right? Like, just set up auto deposit and like save to your goals. But like, that's been a great source of growth for us and a great attraction for our customers. So but I think where we have invested the most, more than anybody, is in like advice that is really smart. Like, how much should you put in your IRA versus your Roth versus your 401k versus your taxable accounts? Like, Betterment has great advice for that. That's free and accessible to all of our customers, right? Tax optimization around that, kind of pushing the right assets into the right accounts, something that we call asset location or tax coordinated portfolio. We have that, and it works better than anybody in the market, better than Schwab, better than Fidelity, just like certainly better than any of the startup competitors who none of these companies even do it. We do have, I think we have tax loss harvesting. Like, we just do all this stuff that actually that helps you pay less tax and therefore keep more of your money and make more of it. And
Right, and like the way my takeaway on that is like, kind of this relentless focus on making sure that you're creating the best product possible. Because especially in this industry, I can imagine marketing is not easy because you can't really tell or you can't predict what's going to happen to people's money if they're investing in the markets, right? And so, over time, obviously, you can invest in perhaps like something like less risky, like bonds or ETFs versus individual stocks or whatever. But it's just like you can't make certain promises in your marketing efforts, and so a lot of it is word of mouth of like people that around them, using the platform and being like, I invested X amount and I've made this much over 3-4 months. Like you should do the same if you have some money that you want to put aside. And so in those cases, like the product is really, I think, what speaks for itself. And if you're not really focused on making sure that the product is great and also that you're focused on the customer and making sure that they're getting the most out of it, then it's really easy to just fail, I think.
I think that's right. The product has to be great. The customer service has to be great. I think for years, like all of us in the office were taking the calls. Like we always prioritized it. I think in the last couple years, like I'll be honest, I think we've grown so much. I think our customer service has suffered a little bit. Like we Betterment have like probably not lived up to our own standards for like where we wanted to be. We've been investing recently and sort of making sure like we're ahead of our scale and all that kind of stuff. Customer service is so important, and in referrals and delighting customers. So that's another big one.
Jon, when it comes specifically to robo-advising, there's the companies that you mentioned and so many others are getting into that space, and they already have established customers that they could perhaps transform into a new customer in this specific new product that they launch. When it comes to the Schwabs of the world, for example, is it better for Betterment to compete against them or to somehow work with them and their existing customers? And is that something that you guys have already been doing or plan to do?
One thing that a lot of people don't know about Betterment is that we have 3 different ways that we distribute. We go direct to consumer. Almost all of your listeners who know of Betterment are going to know of us that way, right? Like you can go to betterment.com and sign up for an account and save and invest and spend and all that kind of stuff. We also sell 401ks. And so that's a B2B sale. We're going to companies and managing their 401k plans, and all the employees get a Betterment account. And it looks just like your retail account. It's got the same options and the same retirement planning and everything, but it also has your 401k. And that's been a really powerful part of our platform, an important way in which we're growing. That B2B sale. We also do, HSAs, by the way, and other types of accounts. And then there's a third, which is we sell through advisors. We are the platform for thousands of investment advisors, individual investment advisors, like you might see in your town, who have their name outside on the door, and it says First Road Investment Advisors. And when you go and you talk to them and they make you a financial plan, they may say, and we think you should invest your money with Betterment because it's the lowest cost and best managed platform out there. They may not even say you that, but they'll say like, here's a product, and it's branded as First Road Advisors. Like you get your statements and everything from First Road Advisors, but Betterment is powering that, and doing the tax optimization and the website and the mobile apps and all of that kind of stuff.
Got it.
And
Awesome.
So that's another way that we partner with the existing ecosystem.
Awesome.
And all of that is like, it's incredibly low cost, by the way, for those advisors. And they pass those savings on to their clients.
I have a very important question that I always ask people that are in the industry. Is it finance or finance?
It's finance if you're highfalutin. And,
Got it. So here's another one. If it's finance, then why don't we call it fintech and we call it fintech?
Because it's better than fine. I don't know. It's
I like it. I like it. So on a more serious note, in the last few months, I think it was the last few months. I'm losing track of time these days. And by the way, I don't know if we mentioned it earlier or if it was offline, but Pat and I have been using Betterment for almost 4 or 5 years now, and we love every aspect of it. Of course, we love the part that makes us more money as well. But recently, and I loved your emails, by the way, the ones that you would send with signed off Jon Stein. I'd always read those. but you recently ousted yourself as the CEO of Betterment and moved on to just, the chairman role. And when I got that email, I was a little bit disappointed. I was like, man, I really liked Jon. I really liked his emails. I was making good money on Betterment. Like, are things going to change? Like, are things going to be different once the founder is no longer there, right? Like, we're the founder hours. So we look at things through like the eyes of the founder, and we're like, damn, like usually when that happens, like it's not always good. Why'd you make that decision? And, what's next for Betterment?
Well, I'll still send you emails if you want.
Yeah, please. Please. You got to get that journalist in you activated.
Exactly. No, I've actually gone back to journaling now that I have a little more time. Speaking of being a journalist, but look, one of the most important parts of being a leader, being a CEO, is recruiting talent, and I'm always recruiting talent. And for the last couple of years, I'd been looking for another senior leader. I knew, like, you've got your team, like you're always trying to like level up your team and like recruit, senior people into that team. And like, looking at CROs and CMOs and COOs and like all of those kinds of things. And I was having trouble kind of like slotting the right person in. And in the course of that process, I chatted with over 100 executives, and I wasn't, focused on a single role, but I was starting to wonder and ask, first, myself and like my wife, and and then like trusted advisors, and a couple of my senior partners on the team and stuff. Like, what if like actually the thing I want to do is replace me? And of course everyone's like, no, like don't do that. Like, it's kind of like you. They're like, no, like it's hard. That's going to be bad. Like, you can't replace the founder. Here's all the things you do. Everyone's very nice, But I just had this suspicion that I've thrown so much at Betterment and I care so much about it, and yet like maybe somebody with like new energy, like I'm not going anywhere. I can still like provide my ideas and my energy, but like if I found the right person, wouldn't that be amazing, right? And I first I remember talking to Sarah, May of 2020, and when I first met her, and it was in this context of a CRO or a COO, but I could tell that like her experiences were such, she'd run a giant company at Viacom, and I could tell that she could just carry a lot, and like I just wanted to get her in, and so like we talked about a role, and I hired her as a consultant, and just kind of like saw the way that she was in like our first executive meeting. She was just like so on point, and like we got to a better place more efficiently than than before she was there. And that I've seen that kind of thing before, but this was like a whole new level, and I was I just felt it was the right fit, and I started giving her more and more, and I gave her like our whole 2021 planning process, and she like knocked it out of the park. The team, was taking to her; they loved her. I saw that like very quickly, and fortunately, she said yes, and my board, got around it, and it all worked out. And I feel just super lucky. Really, I mean, I keep saying that in this, but I've just been so fortunate, like to find that person, who's the fit. It's just, I think it's a rare thing, and now I get to be the chairman and be a resource for her whenever she needs me, and be there for the company. And I feel, I have a lot more love and energy to give Betterment today than maybe I did even when I was CEO, and just sort of like stretched to doing just that job. And I also have this curiosity in general for like other ways that I might help
Right.
Make people better off.
Yeah, and we've talked to so many founders who have like sort of talked about their personal experiences, but how different it is, when you're a small company and you're like 10, 15, 20 people, to then having, hundreds, if not thousands, 10,000s of people to manage. It's like a totally different role, and that operational sort of side kicks in, and oftentimes as a founder, you may want to do it, or you may not want to do it, or you may be good at it and maybe you're not. And so you have to sort of figure out, where you sort of fit in. And so for you personally, like, do you see yourself kind of the foreseeable future still being like Betterment and kind of, being in that role, or are there other things that you're passionate about or excited about that you want to go out there and maybe build or invest in? Like, what's kind of the next 5-10 years look like in your eyes?
Everyone wants to know what's next, and there's a ton of interesting opportunities. I'm trying to just take my time, though. I definitely don't know the answer, but people are asking me to run this company, or join this investing firm, or join this or that board, and it's just it's very flattering. It's wonderful, but I probably my gut is that I'm most likely to start another company if I do something. I don't know what it will be, but I think that it will have a positive impact on people. I've been drawn a bit to policy, like I like that idea that like the government is a way of helping folks. But it's not something I actually know anything about, right? So that's a challenge.
That might not be a bad thing. Going into it from that angle, because sometimes when you know too much, nothing gets done.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's fair. So that's interesting to me, and we'll see. I'm really just enjoying like getting to explore stuff and like learn and like have conversations, and I'm having so much fun with it.
Well, Jon, I know it's late by you because you're out in Massachusetts and we're here in LA, and it's not too early here either. I sleep early, but we thank you so much for taking your time to chat with us about your journey as an individual and also as a founder and leader. And it's just been an inspiring story that you started off as this kid that was involved and wanted to be. It clearly seemed like you were going to be a leader, and then go to college and you're a little bit confused. And it's like everybody's kind of been there, right? They've had highs and lows in life, and at times you think that the lows are a lot worse than the highs, and that those lows are never going to end. But you kind of just have to pick yourself up and get back on the road, just like you did, and things will happen. So I hope that people are inspired through your journey and can take something out of it, and definitely they should sign up for Betterment. That's definitely what they should do. And this is not an ad. It's crazy. Like it's I don't even have to get paid to do ads. I just do it because I'm a true fan. But thank you so much. There's not much more I can say.
Thank you, and I agree. It's stay on that road. And a thing I always say, anyone who works with me would know that I love to say, and just enjoy the journey, right? And like take advantage of every opportunity that comes at you. And that's not always easy, as you say. Sometimes you get negative, you get in a rut. It's not super fun. You're tired of driving, but just see the bright side. Think positive. Look for keep your eyes open, and you'll see amazing things in life. And try and take advantage of those opportunities. And try and help others see them too. Right. That's a big part of what we can do.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Thanks, Jon.
Thanks, guys. Pleasure. Be well.